"Open this door. This is my house," he shouted. The woman didn't blink. "Not anymore. You sold it. Remember?" That's when it hit him. He had blocked his wife, sold the house behind her back, and vanished with plans to enjoy his $10 million lottery win. But in his rush, he left the money on the bed. She found it. She left. And now, everything he thought he escaped was gone, without him. Before we continue, subscribe for more interesting stories, like and share. Now let's dive into the story. Richard sat frozen at the kitchen table, the lottery ticket shaking slightly in his hand. His heart thudded like a drum in his chest. He read the numbers again. Then again. They matched. All of them. $10 million. He looked up at the ceiling fan slowly spinning above him, as if it too was stunned by the sudden twist in fate. The silence in the house was thick, broken only by the faint sound of cartoons playing in the living room. His daughter, Ella, was curled on the couch with a juice box. Claire, his wife of 12 years, was on the phone with her sister, laughing about something trivial. And here he was, a secret millionaire. For a moment, he considered rushing to Claire, waving the ticket in the air, lifting her off the ground in joy. But then something in him shifted. A cold, quiet thought whispered, "What if I don't tell her?" They had struggled for years. Claire always managed the bills, always asked where the money was going, always held him accountable. Now, finally, he had the chance to be free, truly free, and he didn't want to explain himself to anyone. He folded the ticket neatly and slipped it into the back of his wallet. Then he looked toward the hallway where Claire was still chatting, completely unaware that their lives had just changed forever. "She doesn't need to know," he muttered to himself. It was the beginning of the end. It happened faster than even Richard expected. Within a week of hiding the winning ticket, he was already talking to real estate agents in secret. The house wasn't even on the market, yet he found a buyer instantly. A wealthy young couple who were relocating from out of state and wanted a quiet, suburban home. Claire's dream home. She had picked every detail in that house. The pale yellow curtains, the glass porch light, the sunflower tiles in the kitchen. It had taken them years to turn it into something they could finally call their own. And now Richard was selling it behind her back. He justified it in his head. "Once I cash the ticket, I can buy us 5 houses. She won't even miss this one. And she'll be fine eventually." But in truth, Richard wasn't planning to take Claire or Ella with him. He had booked a one-way flight to another state using a fake name. His story? A business trip for a few days. Some investment opportunity he had to check out. The night before leaving, he sat beside Claire on the bed and smiled weakly. "I'll only be gone a few days," he said. "I promise." Claire, half asleep, mumbled, "Don't forget to call Ella before bedtime." He nodded. Of course. But he knew he wouldn't. Downstairs, the buyers had already wired the full payment to a hidden account Richard opened weeks ago. The signed deed sat in a sealed envelope, to be delivered the moment he walked out the door. His bags were packed. His plan was set. And Claire had no idea that by the time she made her morning coffee, she would no longer own the house she stood in. Richard was buzzing with adrenaline. He zipped the last suitcase shut and glanced around the bedroom one final time. On the bed lay a plain white envelope, thick and slightly open. It held the entire $10 million check he had collected quietly the day before. He meant to slide it into his suitcase, but in his flurry of last-minute arrangements, he forgot. "Taxi's waiting," the driver texted. He grabbed his phone, double-checked that Claire's number was blocked, and slipped out the front door. No goodbye, no explanation. Just silence and betrayal wrapped in a business trip lie. 10 minutes later, Claire walked into the bedroom humming softly, still in her robe. She was carrying Ella's socks and one of her daughter's missing crayons. She noticed the bed slightly ruffled. Richard had already left for the airport. But then her eyes caught it. The envelope. Curious, she picked it up. It was heavy. When she peeked inside, her heart nearly stopped. A check. A real one. Made out to Richard for $10 million. Her hand shook. Her breath caught. "What is this?" she whispered. She reached for her phone, heart racing, and dialed Richard. Straight to voicemail. Again. And again. Nothing. She tried texting. "Richard, what's going on? Did you win this and forget to tell me? Call me now." But all her messages bounced back. Blocked. She dropped onto the bed, frozen. The truth began to settle in like a heavy fog. He hadn't just left for a trip. He had left her. He was never coming back. And the check on the bed? It wasn't a gift. It was a mistake. one he would come to regret more than anything. Claire sat at the edge of the bed, the check still clutched in her hand like it might vanish if she let go. $10 million. 10 million. She stared at the name printed on it. Richard Moore. Her husband. The same man who, just the night before, kissed her on the forehead and said, "I'll be back by Thursday." The same man who always claimed they couldn't afford new clothes for Ella's school play, or a proper vacation, or even a decent heater last winter. And now this. The number didn't make sense. It felt like a prank. But the banking logo was real, the formatting unmistakable. Claire had worked in an office long enough to recognize authenticity. Her first instinct had been panic, then disbelief. But now, the tears she expected never came. She wasn't crying. She was calculating. Why would he leave this behind? No note. No clue. No warning. Just a $10 million check and a wife left behind with a puzzled heart. She checked the account details again. It was freshly issued. No signs of a fake. Her fingers trembled as she typed his name into Google. Her breath caught as she saw the local news. A recent lottery winner in the area had quietly claimed a $10 million jackpot. There was a photo. It was him. Her Richard. Smiling, but not the smile she knew. It was smug, free, a man unburdened by wife or child. Claire felt her pulse slow. The fog of confusion began to clear, and the awful truth sharpened like a blade. He didn't forget to tell her. He planned not to. She opened her messaging app again and scrolled through their old conversations. Photos of family dinners, notes about grocery lists, cute texts about Ella's drawings. And now nothing. Blocked. Erased. Disconnected like a number he no longer needed. Claire looked at the check again. This wasn't an accident. This was arrogance. He had run off to live his dream life alone, assuming she'd be too stunned, too heartbroken to ever catch up. But he had left the money behind. And Claire? She wasn't the type of woman to crumble. She was the type to rise. 2 days passed, and Claire still hadn't told a soul. The $10 million check was now locked in a drawer under her socks. She barely slept, barely ate. Ella noticed the tension, but was too young to ask the right questions. Claire had simply told her, "Daddy's away on a long trip," and left it at that. She spent those 2 days pacing, researching, planning. Every time she stared at the check, it reminded her of two things: the betrayal and the power it left behind. But she wasn't ready for what happened next. On the third morning, just after breakfast, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. Claire was in the kitchen wiping Ella's mouth when the doorbell rang. She opened the door to find a well-dressed young couple, probably in their 30s, smiling with excitement. A moving truck idled behind them. "Hi," the woman said brightly. "We're the Johnsons. Today's the handover, right?" Claire blinked. "I'm sorry, what handover?" The man stepped forward. "We just bought this house. Richard Moore? He sold it to us last week. We have the signed documents and proof of payment." Claire's chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice low. "This house isn't for sale." But the woman was already unfolding a stack of legal documents. "Here, deed transfer, signatures, property title update. Everything's been cleared. We were told the house would be vacant by today." Claire took the papers with trembling hands. Her eyes darted over the signature. Richard Moore. Dated 2 days before he left. He hadn't just left her. He had sold the roof over her head without telling her. The betrayal stabbed deeper than she thought possible. She stepped back into the doorway, shielding Ella behind her. Her voice was calm, but firm. "I need you to give me a moment. Please wait outside." She shut the door gently, turned the lock, and fell against it. The lies had layers. Not only had he abandoned them, but he had erased them from their own home like they were nothing more than dust to be swept away. She looked at her daughter, still happily playing with her stuffed toy, and made a silent decision. She would not give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not even Richard. Claire didn't cry. Not even once. She waited until the couple had stepped off the porch and returned to their SUV, still chatting and checking their phones. Then she walked upstairs, her face stone still, and pulled out the drawer where she had hidden the check. $10 million. The same amount her husband was planning to use to disappear from her life, until fate made him forget it. Claire moved quickly but methodically. She grabbed a travel bag and began folding clothes. Essentials only: her daughter's school uniforms, her own work shoes, Ella's favorite pink stuffed rabbit, a tiny framed photo of her mother. She didn't pack for comfort. She packed for escape. "Sweetheart," she called softly, We're going on a little trip. Ella perked up, smiling. Is Daddy coming? Claire froze for a breath. Then she knelt beside her daughter and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. No, honey. Just you and me for now. Ella nodded like it was an adventure, and Claire forced a small smile. Downstairs, she checked the window. The couple was still waiting in their car, now looking slightly confused. She didn't have time for confrontation, only action. She reached for her laptop and typed in a local bank's website. Within minutes, she had opened a high-security account under her maiden name. She took the check and drove straight to a branch she knew well. The manager was an old classmate. No questions asked. By evening, the funds had cleared. Claire returned home briefly, just long enough to gather her daughter and one final thing, a note. She left it on the kitchen counter, not for the new homeowners, but for Richard, in case he ever returned to the place he so carelessly abandoned. It read, "You didn't just sell the house. You sold your own peace. But you left the treasure behind. I took it, and I'm never looking back." By nightfall, the house was empty. Claire and Ella were gone. No social media trace. No forwarding address. No tearful goodbye. Just silence. And a woman who refused to be destroyed by betrayal. Not when she had the power to rebuild on her own terms. Richard stepped into the gold-trimmed lobby of the five-star hotel like a man reborn. Polished marble stretched beneath his feet, and soft piano music floated through the air. The scent of wealth, new leather, imported cologne, and aged whiskey wrapped around him like a warm coat. He strolled past the concierge desk, barely able to suppress his grin. Freedom, luxury, peace. He was no longer Richard the husband, Richard the father. He was Richard the winner now, $10 million richer, unshackled from the boring life he'd carefully shed like old skin. Reservation for more, he said, adjusting the lapel of his blazer. Presidential suite. The receptionist nodded, typing swiftly. Yes, sir. Welcome. May I have your payment method? Richard reached for his carry-on bag, unzipped the front pocket, and froze. No envelope. He unzipped the main compartment. Still nothing. His hands began to move faster. Clothes were tossed aside. Toiletries. Socks. A book. But no envelope. His fingers trembled. He checked again. And again. Still nothing. A sudden chill spread through his chest. No, 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 he muttered under his breath. He crouched, dumping everything onto the polished floor, drawing glances from a nearby couple. Still nothing. He ran his hand through his hair, heart pounding. It's here. I packed it. I swear I. Then it hit him. The bed. The envelope. The rush. The taxi honking outside. The texts. The excitement. He had left it. On the bed. His eyes widened with horror. Sir, the receptionist asked gently. Will you be paying today, or? Give me a moment, Richard snapped, grabbing his phone and stepping aside. He dialed Claire's number. Blocked. Tried again. Blocked. He opened her socials. Nothing. She had vanished. Or worse, made herself unreachable. The same trick he had used had just been flipped on him. He staggered backward, suddenly lightheaded. The life he had imagined, champagne, sweets, endless nights of pleasure, all of it rested on that envelope. Without it, he wasn't a king. He was a fool in borrowed shoes. The receptionist approached quietly. Sir, if we can't confirm payment. Richard didn't wait to hear the rest. He turned on his heel and stormed out of the lobby, dragging his suitcase like a broken promise behind him. The glass door slid open, spilling him back into a world that looked less golden than it had minutes ago. He had run toward paradise and left the treasure on the bed. Richard sat on a bench outside the hotel, staring blankly at the traffic speeding past. The city no longer glowed. It buzzed, mocked, and spun around him like a carousel of mistakes. He wiped his clammy hands on his pants and pulled out his phone again. Claire. He dialed. This number is no longer accepting calls from you. The robotic voice stabbed harder than he expected. He tried again. Same message. He stared at the screen, then clicked on Ella's contact. Blocked. His jaw tightened. No. No, no. Claire wouldn't. She doesn't even know what I. He stopped mid-sentence. Of course she knew. The envelope. She must have found it. That's why she hadn't called, hadn't sent frantic texts or desperate voicemails. She didn't need to. She had the money. And now, she had the last word. He stood up abruptly, pacing near the curb. Sweat prickled his neck as he opened his messaging app, scrolling through their old conversations. Birthdays, groceries, bedtime reminders for Ella. all still there. But now, it was like texting a ghost. Claire, please call me. I left something by mistake. Claire, it's urgent. Please. You don't understand. No replies. No delivered sign. No read receipts. He opened WhatsApp. Blocked. Facebook. Blocked. Instagram. Private. He let out a low growl and hurled his phone against the concrete wall behind him. It cracked on impact, the screen splintering like his composure. A few pedestrians paused to stare. He didn't care. His pulse was racing now, mind spinning. He opened his bank app. Nothing. The balance still hovered around $4,322, the remnants of his old savings, not even enough for a decent suite, let alone the life he'd envisioned. He sat back down and buried his face in his hands. She had done it. She had beaten him at his own game. He'd blocked her first, thinking he could vanish into a better life. But now she'd returned the favor, not out of spite, but out of power. And unlike him, she hadn't left empty-handed. She wouldn't take all of it, he muttered to himself. She'll call, eventually. But in his heart, he knew better. Claire had always been the quiet one, calm, patient, careful. When she loved him, she did it gently. But when she let go, she did it completely. The cab screeched to a stop in front of the house that used to be his. Richard didn't wait for change. He shoved a crumpled bill at the driver, grabbed his suitcase, and stormed toward the porch like a man chasing a ghost. But the moment he reached the walkway, his stomach dropped. The curtains were different. Blue, not cream. The welcome mat gone. The porch light fixture, replaced. It was subtle, but nothing was the same. Still, he rang the bell. Footsteps approached, and the door creaked open. A young man in joggers and a baseball cap looked at him with raised brows. Yes. Richard blinked. This is my house. I mean, my wife, Claire, my daughter. They live here. The man's brow furrowed. Sir, we bought this place 2 days ago. Got the keys from a Mr. Richard Moore. That's you. The blood drained from Richard's face. He'd forgotten his own betrayal had paperwork. Signatures. Notarized deals. Proof. He was the one who had sold this place. And now it belonged to someone else. The man studied him. You okay? Was there anyone here when you moved in? The man exchanged a glance with a woman who had just walked into view behind him. His wife, holding a toddler. Yeah, there was a woman and a kid. She was packed already. Said she didn't want trouble. Gave us the garage remote and walked out with her daughter. No drama. Richard's voice cracked. Did she say where she was going? The man shook his head. Didn't leave a forwarding address. No contact info. Just walked off down the street with a cab. Richard swallowed, the weight of it all collapsing on his chest. She left just like that? The woman behind the man nodded softly. She looked calm, like someone who had finally made peace with leaving something behind. The words hit him harder than any punch. He staggered backward, gripping the railing to keep from falling. She hadn't waited. She hadn't fought. She hadn't begged him to come back. She just left. And worse, she took the treasure he had foolishly abandoned. Thank you, he muttered, backing away. The man nodded and gently closed the door. Richard stood in the street, staring at the house that was no longer his. Claire was gone. Ella too. And not a single trace of either remained. No clues. No trail. Just the bitter taste of karma and silence. Claire stepped off the bus with one hand holding her daughter's and the other gripping the black duffel bag that now held the future. Not just hers, but Ella's too. The city was unfamiliar. Fast-paced. Loud. But in the chaos, Claire found something she hadn't felt in years. Freedom. No expectations. No Richard. No lies. Just the clean slate she never thought she'd need or deserve. She rented a small apartment. Nothing fancy, but safe and quiet. Enough for them to sleep without worry. The very next morning, Claire took the envelope, now carefully resealed, and walked into a bank downtown. The teller's eyes widened as she slid the check across the counter. $10 million? The woman asked softly. Claire didn't blink. Yes, I'd like to deposit it. Quietly, she got a financial advisor the same day. Not a flashy one. An older woman with gray curls and sharp eyes who didn't care for drama. First things first, the advisor said. Don't tell anyone where this came from. Second, let's make this last. You're going to outlive the money if you act recklessly. Claire nodded. I don't want to spend it. I want to grow it. And so she did. Within a few weeks, she opened a boutique cafe. A warm little corner space with tall windows, house-baked goods, and a soft pink sign that read Ella's Place. Locals wandered in out of curiosity. They stayed for the atmosphere and came back for Claire's calm energy. She wasn't flashy. She didn't wear diamonds. But there was something about the way she moved, graceful, self-contained, like someone who had once fallen and now stood taller because of it. By month 4, she'd bought the building. By month 6, she opened a second location across town. She started taking courses in business management, got legal help setting up an investment portfolio, and carefully put most of the money into long-term assets, stocks, real estate, a trust fund for Ella. The single mother who had once cried alone in a kitchen now sat on panels, speaking to other women about financial independence. Still, she didn't post pictures, didn't tell her story, didn't even change her phone number, but kept it switched off. Her face wasn't on billboards, but her impact was everywhere. And when people asked where she came from, she'd simply smile and say, "From a place I never want to return to." Night had fallen. The cafe was closed, the lights dimmed, and the chairs stacked gently on tables. Claire sat on the back patio, wrapped in a thick shawl, a cup of chamomile tea cradled in her hands. Ella sat beside her, now 8, her head resting on her mother's lap. They often came out here at night. Just the two of them. No customers, no distractions. Just stars, silence, and the occasional whisper of wind. "Mama," Ella said, voice soft. "Why don't we live with Daddy anymore?" The question was innocent, but it pierced Claire's heart like a shard of glass. She took a breath, steady and long. Her fingers brushed Ella's hair slowly. "We used to," Claire replied gently. "But then Daddy made a choice. A choice that didn't include us." Ella blinked up at her, confused. "Did he stop loving us?" Claire hesitated, then looked out into the night sky. "He got lost," she said softly. "Sometimes, people don't even realize they're hurting the ones they love until it's too late." "But didn't you miss him?" Ella asked, voice small. Claire's eyes stung. In that moment, flashes of those final days came rushing back. The crumpled note on the kitchen table, the sound of silence after blocked calls, the way her knees gave out when she realized he'd sold their home like she was disposable. Yes, she missed him. Not just his presence, but the version of him she thought he was. She looked down at her daughter. "I did. I cried. I screamed. I felt like I had no air left to breathe." Ella sat up now, fully awake, her eyes wide. "What did you do?" Claire's expression softened. She leaned down and kissed her daughter's forehead. "I packed our things. I held your hand. And I walked away." "Why?" Claire held her close. "Because we don't chase what broke us, baby." Ella nodded slowly, repeating the words like a sacred promise. "We don't chase what broke us." Claire smiled, her eyes glistening. She didn't tell Ella how many nights she cried herself to sleep, or how she'd stood in front of that front door for an hour before leaving, hoping Richard would magically appear and say it was all a mistake. But he didn't. So she'd taken her pain, her child, and her chance, and turned it into purpose. "Are you still sad?" Ella asked. Claire looked at her, her bright eyes, her brave heart, and whispered, "Not anymore." And for the first time in years, she meant it. Claire Moore no longer existed. In city records, bank statements, and legal documents, she was now Clara Ellis, a quiet, poised entrepreneur with no visible past and no appetite for the spotlight. The name change was subtle, almost forgettable, exactly how she wanted it. No press announcements, no Facebook posts, just a quiet visit to the courthouse, a few notarized papers, and a whisper to Ella, "This name will protect us." And it did. She took down every old photo online, deleted social media, and stopped answering calls from mutual friends. No breadcrumbs, no clues, only forward steps. But while she erased her trail, her success left undeniable footprints. Ella's Place grew beyond a cafe. It became a community brand, offering scholarships for single mothers, hosting self-worth workshops, and supporting abused women with free counseling sessions. Her accountant once asked, "Do you know people are calling you the ghost investor? No one's seen you, but everyone's talking about you." Claire only smiled. She didn't need applause. She needed peace. Her network expanded quietly. Real estate in her new name, stocks, silent partnerships in women-owned startups. And yet, she remained unseen. She turned down interviews, declined awards, refused to be featured. Let them guess. She walked into rooms where no one recognized her. And that became her greatest power. People began to whisper, There's this woman. She vanished after a betrayal and built an empire. She's the one who left with nothing and came back with everything. They say her ex doesn't even know what city she's in. Claire would hear these things in passing, in cafes, salons, and conferences, and never flinch. Only Ella knew the full story, and she was taught never to repeat it. One evening, as Claire reviewed documents in her home office, a headline popped up on her news feed. Mysterious woman builds $1 million brand from heartbreak. Her fingers hovered over the mouse. She clicked. The article never used her real name. It was just speculation. A story about a woman who rose after betrayal. Someone who turned pain into profit without ever stepping onto a podium. Claire read every word with a calm heart. She was no longer trying to prove herself to anyone, especially not to a man who once threw her away for a fantasy. As the article ended, it quoted a line attributed to her. You don't need revenge. Sometimes your success tells the story better than your voice ever could. Claire leaned back and whispered to herself, let them keep wondering. Because the truth was simple. She didn't just survive. She became more. Richard once stepped into the luxury hotel like a king. Now he wandered through it like a ghost. The champagne had stopped flowing. The room service staff no longer greeted him with warmth. And the smile of the concierge, once wide and eager, had thinned into a polite nod of tolerance. It hadn't even been 6 months. When he first checked in, Richard ordered everything with reckless ease. Lobster dinners, designer clothes, fine cigars. He tipped excessively, hosted strangers in the penthouse suite, and laughed louder than he ever had at home. He wasn't Richard the husband anymore. He was Rich, the high roller. The man who made it. But Rich had no budget. No plan. No idea how fast $10 million could disappear when you were trying to live like a movie star. It started with the shopping. Then came the investments pitched by fast-talking friends he met at the rooftop bar. Crypto, nightclubs, a failed app idea. Each venture bled money faster than the last. By month 4, his accounts began to thin. But he didn't slow down. He just stopped looking. By month 5, the suite bill alone had crossed 6 figures. The hotel manager began to ask questions. By month 6, the card declined at dinner. And suddenly, the people vanished. The woman who'd once clung to his arm stopped returning his calls. The bros, who said they'd build empires together, moved on to the next fool. Even the bellboy who used to admire his Rolex now barely looked up. Richard stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his suite, looking down at the city he thought he would conquer. His shirt was wrinkled, his phone silent, and for the first time, the silence wasn't peaceful, it was mocking. He poured the last glass of whiskey from a bottle that once cost $900, sat on the edge of the bed, opened his banking app, and stared at the number. What remained couldn't even buy him a week in the same room he now sulked in. And that was when he muttered the words he hadn't dared to say out loud. I left everything that mattered for this? Richard hadn't searched Claire's name since the day he blocked her. But now, sitting alone in a downgraded hotel room with cracked leather chairs and a humming mini fridge, curiosity crept back in like a cold draft under the door. His hands trembled, not from alcohol this time, but from something deeper. Regret. He opened his old Facebook account, typed Claire Moore, and hit search. Nothing. He tried Instagram, then LinkedIn, then even her maiden name. Still nothing. Then he remembered Ella, his daughter. Maybe through her school. Maybe a photo. One search led to another until he stumbled on a local business article titled, 10 Women Who Rose After Loss and Built Empires. His eyes narrowed. It wasn't the title. It was the photo. A woman in a navy blue power suit, chin up, eyes calm, standing in front of a banner that read, Ella's Foundation, Rebuilding from the Ashes. He clicked. The caption underneath froze his breath. Clara Ellis, founder of Ella's Foundation, known as the woman who outran pain. Clara Ellis? No, that was Claire. His Claire. He zoomed into the photo. The cheekbones, the posture, the unmistakable fire in her eyes. It was her. She looked older, stronger. Not worn, but wiser. The type of woman who had been through war and came out in silk armor. He scrolled. Quotes from her keynote address lined the article. Sometimes the people who break you think you'll shatter. But some of us turn into glass that cuts back. I stopped begging for closure the day I realized silence is its own answer. Every sentence felt like a slap across Richard's soul. She wasn't just alive, she was thriving. With his daughter. with the money he foolishly left behind, with a version of herself he never imagined. He sat back, jaw clenched, heart sinking. She had renamed herself, rebuilt herself, and somehow, she had become everything he thought he would be. He tried to click on her foundations page, blocked. He typed her new name into Facebook, no profile found. Claire had erased him so completely, it was as if he never existed. But now, her new name rang in his ears like a curse. Clara Ellis, the woman who outran pain. And he was just the man left behind by it. The gala was being held at the Grand Horizon Ballroom, one of the most exclusive venues in the city. Ironically, the same place Richard had once tried to book for his solo birthday bash back, when he still had money to burn and an ego to inflate. Now he stood outside in a borrowed suit, shoes scuffed, hair slightly overgrown, pretending he belonged. He hadn't been invited, of course. But when he saw the banner earlier that week, Annual Benefit Gala by Ellis Foundation, he knew he had to go. Not to beg, not even to speak, just to see her. One last time. He slipped in during the cocktail hour, blending in with the crowd of donors, photographers, and well-dressed socialites. His name wasn't on any list, but his once-practiced charm still got him past a distracted usher. He stood in the back, behind a pillar, holding a glass of water like it was wine. Then she appeared. Claire, or rather, Clara Ellis. Draped in an emerald gown that shimmered under the chandelier light, she commanded the room without saying a word. Her posture was regal, her expression unreadable. Applause followed her like a shadow. She smiled, laughed politely, posed for pictures with donors. Ella stood beside her, now almost a teenager, graceful, confident, glowing. Richard felt like an outsider in his own past. He wanted to speak, to say something, anything, to apologize, to explain, to ask her how she managed to rise from the ruin he left behind. But when she finally walked his way, flanked by Foundation board members and photographers, she looked straight through him. No pause, no blink, no hesitation, just silence. She didn't stop, didn't even seem to recognize him. And maybe that was the real punishment. Not public disgrace, not prison, not poverty, but being erased from the memory of someone you once vowed to protect. Richard turned slowly as she disappeared into the crowd. He didn't finish his water, didn't stay for the speech. He just walked out of the Grand Horizon Ballroom and into the night, a man haunted by the echo of a woman who no longer saw him. The carpet was faded. The walls, once pristine white, were stained with time. The golden trim on the hallway mirrors had chipped. But Richard remembered every inch of this place, the first night of his freedom. The luxury hotel that once welcomed him with open arms now stood like a mausoleum. The elevator let out a dying groan as it carried him up to the top floor. No concierge greeted him. No jazz music echoed from the lounge. The once glamorous hotel had lost its soul, like him. He walked slowly toward the penthouse suite, now permanently locked and no longer in use. A tarnished plaque still bore the words, Presidential Suite. But that wasn't his destination today. He turned instead to the modest room down the hall, room 812. The one they'd given him on his final day, when the money was gone, and the management could no longer pretend he mattered. The key still worked. The room smelled of mildew and old dreams. Richard stepped inside and closed the door behind him. This was where he had first realized the money was missing, where panic had punched him in the gut, where he had paced the floor, screaming Claire's name into a phone that no longer connected. Now it was silent. He sat on the edge of the bed, the same bed he once flung his suitcase across in excitement. His hands shook as he took out his wallet. A single crumpled photo remained, a family picture. Claire, Ella, himself. It had faded so much, he could barely make out his smile. He stared at it like it was a relic from another life. Because that's what it was. That man, grinning beside his family, was dead. This man was a ghost, haunting the ashes of his own decisions. Outside the window, the city moved on without him. Cars, people, purpose. But in here, time stood still. He whispered into the quiet, not knowing if the walls could still remember his voice. I ran from love, for money I couldn't even keep. A knock startled him. He stood quickly, heart racing. But no one was there. Just a draft, or a memory, or both. He sank back onto the bed, resting his head in his hands. And for the first time in years, he wept. Not because he was broke, but because he had finally counted the true cost, and realized he'd traded a kingdom for an empty room. Once upon a time, there was a man who mistook fortune for freedom. His name was Richard, a husband, a father, a man who once had enough love to last a lifetime. But when $10 million fell into his lap, he didn't see it as a blessing to share. He saw it as a ticket to escape. He ran, not from danger, but from responsibility. He sold his home, packed his bags, and blocked the woman who had shared his every burden. And as he sped toward a dream of champagne nights and golden mornings, he left behind the only wealth that ever truly mattered, a family that believed in him. But fate has a quiet way of correcting arrogance. Because in his haste, he forgot the very thing he thought would buy him paradise, the money. Claire found it on the bed, left behind like a forgotten promise. She didn't scream. She didn't chase. She simply rose. With dignity. With quiet strength. With her daughter's hand in hers. While Richard lived loud for a season, Claire built in silence. And when the lights dimmed on his fantasy, when the friends vanished and the party stopped, he turned around, hoping to return to the life he discarded. But by then, the doors were shut. The house, gone. The wife, changed. The daughter, growing in peace. He searched the world for the woman he betrayed, only to find her standing on a stage, reborn with a new name, a new purpose, and a voice stronger than ever. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't seek revenge. She walked past him as if he were never there. And that silence? It was louder than any punishment. Because in the end, it wasn't her scream that buried him. It was the quiet strength of a woman who chose not to look back. The man who ran too fast left behind the only thing that mattered. And when he finally looked back, the doors were already shut. Greed moves blindly. Wisdom sees ahead. He blocked her to escape his truth. But in the end, it was her silence that buried him. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful tales that remind us what truly matters in life. One story can change a heart, maybe even yours.